In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Before I get into this review, just another quick thank you to everyone who's entered into my 400 subscriber contest so far. I really appreciate everyone doing that. If you haven't entered already and want to do so, I'm going to link the original video for that with the rules and the prizes, etc., and everybody else's entries in the 400 subscriber contest playlist below. I would also like to give a huge thank you to Seth from Hellbound for nominating me for Horror Tuber of the Month again. This is like the 4th time I've been nominated, which still blows my mind. I'm really flattered that people like my channel enough to keep nominating me, especially the people who have nominated me so far, given the kind of content they're making. So if you want to vote for me or anybody else you think deserves it, because everybody who's been nominated definitely deserves it in my eyes, I'm going to link Seth's original video below, and please just subscribe to Seth because he is making some of the best horror content on YouTube right now, in my opinion. He's reviewing really obscure stuff that more people need to be talking about, that I need to get around to watching eventually, and he's doing really smartly worded, smartly written, well-produced reviews that are excellent for said movies. There's a reason he was nominated for Horror Tuber of the Month, and please vote for whoever you think deserves it. Today, I'm going to be reviewing C.H.U.D 2, Bud the C.H.U.D. This movie is, I guess, a sequel to the original C.H.U.D, which I just reviewed. I'll get more into the sort of, I guess, part of that in a little bit. But this movie came out in 1989. It was directed by David Irving, who, as far as I can tell, did not make any other horror movies, but he also directed movies such as Goodbye, Cruel World. I wrote down Night of the, and then forgot to write down Night of the what. Great. That's on me for stupid note-taking. I'll put down what it's actually the night of right there. He also directed 3 different musical fairy tale adaptations, all in 1987. I expect they were fairly short and for kids, but that's still really impressive. I think they were Rumpelstiltskin, The Emperor's New Clothes, and Sleeping Beauty. This movie stars Garrett Graham as Bud the C.H.U.D. He was in a lot of really important horror movies, notably Phantom of the Paradise, Child's Play 2, and Demon Seed, which I've mentioned before. That movie traumatized me, thanks. Tricia Leigh Fisher, who, as far as I know, was also not in any horror movies, but some of her more genre-oriented output includes Hostile Intentions, Stick, and Next Gen. Robert Vaughn, who was also in Demon Seed, thanks for traumatizing me again. Superman 3 and The Towering Inferno. And Bianca Jagger, who also didn't do any other horror films, but was in Studio 54, The American Success Company, and The Cannonball Run, and is currently a human rights advocate, which is pretty cool. Allegedly, this movie also features an uncredited appearance from the amazing Robert Englund, of course known for playing Freddy Krueger and appearing in other horror films, but most notably playing Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. He apparently plays one of the parents escorting trick-or-treaters to different houses in this film. I didn't see him, so I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm going off what IMDb said. Like, I think every movie in this box set I've been reviewing, this is yet another Vestron release. This film follows a few teens who are apparently, as a special treat from their biology teacher, going to be looking at and I think dissecting a real human cadaver. One of the slacker kids makes a huge blunder in said biology class and has to stay after hours in school working in the basement. There he and his friend find the cadaver that they're supposed to be performing on, and they accidentally lose the cadaver, which is not easy to do, but they make it surprisingly easy. In an attempt to fix the problem, they find another cadaver, which has been frozen in this, I guess, cryogenic freezer thing that they find. They bring it back to their house and inadvertently reanimate it. And this, as they find out, is Bud the C.H.U.D, who ends up escaping from their house and wreaking havoc and infecting other people around town with the C.H.U.D enzyme, and things just get crazier from there. And in the meantime, the whole government operation that created these things in the first place is trying to track down Bud the C.H.U.D, who they actually did name Bud the C.H.U.D, and bring him back. So the score for this film was done by Nicholas Pike, who has a pretty good run of horror film music work. He's done work on the Shining miniseries, Graveyard Shift, and the Masters of Horror series. His score for this movie is like the score for C.H.U.D, very synthy and has some very similar rhythmic elements, but it doesn't feel as harsh or dissonant or atmospheric as the score for C.H.U.D was. It definitely has a more kind of fun pop flavor of it, even feeling like new wave or synth pop music at points. There's a certain synth sound that they use and a certain melody that they use that reminds me of an Oingo Boingo song, which is weird, but it reminds me of the song Home Again by Oingo Boingo. Just listen to the song and then, I guess, watch Bud the C.H.U.D and see if you hear the similarities where I hear the similarities. This soundtrack legitimately does have rock elements to it that I thought were really fun. And it has a kind of fun 80s pop rock theme song for Bud the C.H.U.D, which was quite possibly my highlight of the film. There are also songs by the band Wall of Voodoo used throughout the film, predominantly in the Halloween dance scene at the end of this film, because if you haven't gathered it yet, this movie is set during the Halloween season. I wouldn't say any of the bits of the score really stood out to me in any way. The Bud the C.H.U.D theme song is really catchy, I really like it, and the other songs are decent as well. Definitely nothing as artsy going on here as in C.H.U.D, but serviceable and fun. The story for this movie is interesting, because it's not quite C.H.U.D. It feels like, and I think it probably was, a story for another film that had been retooled to be a C.H.U.D sequel, because things just do not line up. Basically, the similarities end with a government project called C.H.U.D that has created these monsters that they don't actually want to destroy or are going to destroy in a way that hurts more people than helps people. But in this case, they had discovered the C.H.U.D enzyme and were trying to harness it for military purposes as opposed to whatever they were doing in the first film. I don't want to spoil that for you, which I thought was kind of cool, but not in line with the first film at all. I guess maybe after the operation from the first film created the C.H.U.D, they were like, we could use this enzyme to create super soldiers or whatever, but you're gonna have to use your imagination quite a bit to make this movie line up in any way with the first film. The biggest difference in this are the C.H.U.D themselves. In the words of one of the characters in the first film, cannibalistic my ass, because these C.H.U.D are not C.H.U.D. They are zombies. They don't eat people, really, even though they go around saying meat and biting people. They just bite them and infect them and turn them into more C.H.U.D. They are definitely not underground dwellers, and they don't look like the C.H.U.D from the first film. They look like people with pale, drained corpse-like faces and sharp teeth, and you can mistake them for people at first. And granted, that could be like the in-between stage of someone mutating into a C.H.U.D, which I think is what created the C.H.U.D in the first place in the first film. But we never see a full-blown monstrous sewer-dwelling, almost reptilian thing like we see in the first movie. There's no mention of them dwelling underground at any point. They mention cannibalistic tendencies, even though they really just bite people, and they don't just bite other people, they bite animals too. So we have animal C.H.U.D walking around, which means they're not humanoid either. So the cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, none of that applies. They're not C.H.U.D at all. In the case of Bud, cannibalistic humanoid undead dude might work, but it definitely does not apply to all the creatures in this. So I really do think they were just trying to shoehorn the C.H.U.D name onto this film, because it's not a Chud movie. The other two big differences here are the tone and the setting. The tone of the film is way more comedic. There's definitely moments of humor and that kind of 80s cheese that just comes by proxy of being a low-budget 80s horror film. But this is straight up an overt horror comedy. The humor is decently orchestrated in this, but none of it actually makes me laugh. Some of what they do with Bud, which I'll get into with character, is fun. The different gags they set up are cute, but nothing ever really makes me laugh in this, even though they're like trying really hard. There are lots of just constant sight gags, constant one-liners, joke after joke after joke, and none of them really land for me. I thought they were kind of endearing, but they didn't really make me laugh. And to be perfectly honest, maybe the funniest thing in this movie for me is pre any Chud anything happening, when they accidentally lose the corpse at the beginning of the film, because it's on this crap, what is it? It's like, it's what you wheel in a body on. What the hell do you call it? I don't remember, but it's on one of those, and they accidentally push it out the door onto the street, and they're chasing this freewheeling corpse down the street as it's just scooting along, and they can't do anything to stop it. And that image just in and of itself I thought was great. Everything else felt a little forced to me, but was kind of endearing, I guess. As I said, the setting definitely adds a different feel. It doesn't have that social commentary and kind of the nasty grittiness of street life, because this movie is not set in a city the way Chud is. This movie is set in this sleepy little town, so it has kind of more of a campy teen horror feel. It's not focused on these like more social issues the way Chud is. It's focused on like less adult teen emotional things a little bit. That kind of mixture of secret experiment that accidentally gets loose combined with these teen characters that kind of results in the living dead walking around, that aspect reminds me a lot of both Return of the Living Dead and Night of the Creeps. But this movie isn't really as smart as either of those films, and it's a lot more goofy and slapstick, which isn't a bad thing per se. It just does similar things to those movies that I think both of those movies do better. I think this movie was never meant to be what Chud was, but it's doing a lot of things that other movies have already done and done better, and not doing them in a way that I think really stands out in any way. The kills are decent fun. They aren't too gory, but there are some kind of creative kills and setups in this, and some kind of visual zombie gags that were a little bit fun. There's a zombie's head that falls off, and he's walking around trying to get it and accidentally kicking it with his foot and just making it roll further away from him and just following his head around for a while. That was cute. A scene near the end, which is probably my favorite bit of gore in the film. One of the Chud is stabbed through the head in the science lab with a Bunsen burner, and he's just got like this unicorn horn of a Bunsen burner sticking out the front of his head with the flame going around, and he's just walking around with his Bunsen burner sticking out of his head, and it's a really, really fun visual. There are some decently creative kills in this, but not many. Most of them just feel like one-note jokes, and you don't actually see any gore or anything, so there's nothing creative going on there. I really, really like the Halloween dance scene towards the end, where the Chud have walked into this dance, and I love the way the Chud are both actually dancing with everyone, which is really cute, and then trying to eat them and accidentally getting a leg to the face, or they'll lunge for someone and then the dance move will pull them away from them. And that's the other thing I can say for this film. It's a pretty well choreographed film. A lot of the action scenes and just gags are fairly well choreographed. All of the acting in this movie is decent, if somewhat cheesy. Bud is probably the highlight for me. His mannerisms are very exaggerated and cartoonish, and especially at the beginning of the film, watching him try to figure out how to be a person again and just stumbling around and imitating people is really fun. There's a scene where he kind of discovers this woman aerobicizing in her house. He's just watching through the window and imitating her and like falling down a little bit and just trying to aerobicize and jump around a little bit. And there is this sympathetic aspect of Bud that is kind of endearing as well. It's not very pronounced because we don't really see a lot of like hatred towards Bud in this. People will freak out and then he'll get angry and he'll eat them, but a lot of times he'll just walk into a place and people will be very unaware that he's not a normal human person, and then he'll just eat them. And I keep saying eat, but he's really just biting them and making them into more C.H.U.D until he's just got this legion of C.H.U.D fans, if you will, following him around. There's also this kind of through line of him being in love with the character of Katie, who's our teen leading lady in this film. He discovers a photo of her earlier in the film and he's in love with her, and there's this kind of morbid but romantic gesture he makes towards the end of the film that, in spite of everything he's done and not actually being that sympathetic, just kind of made me go, aw, poor Bud. I kind of liked that element. It felt kind of weird and forced in, but it was still cute. The main kids in this are decent, but I didn't really connect to any of them. You've got kind of the long-haired teen slacker who doesn't really know what a lot of certain words mean. That's kind of his running gag. You've got kind of the geeky, smarter kid, and then the female character who ultimately kind of saves the day, but doesn't really have a lot of defining character traits, unfortunately. All of them are acted well, but I couldn't really connect to any of them or any characters in this movie. All the adults in this are total and utter caricatures. I thought the kind of satirical dialogue they had for a lot of them was fun, even if the jokes didn't really land for me. I liked the parents of the slacker kid, who are like these rich, uppity people who are always worried about, you know, their carpet and everything being really, really clean. There's a scene where they first are bringing the body of Bud into the house and trying to distract the parents, and they're just watching this special on penguins on TV and making these really weird comments on it. You've also got all of the people in the military in this government operation, in particular this one, I think, sergeant or general, I don't remember what his rank is, who's going after the kids to try to get Bud back. And there's a scene with him in the car where he's like, back in my day, if I stole a corpse, it would be straight to the woodshed with me. And the guy sitting next to him's like, they don't have woodsheds anymore. And he's like, they don't? They seriously don't have woodsheds anymore? It was a weird bit, and I didn't really get it, but I just found it kind of weird and funny. Maybe my favorite character in this is the slacker kid's younger sister, who first sees them bringing Bud's body into the house, and he's like, this body that I'm holding is the boogeyman, and if you tell anybody, this nightmare is going to become real and the boogeyman's going to come and murder you in your sleep. And she quickly slams the door. Throughout the later half of the film, she's just very unfazed by all the weird stuff she's seeing around, because presumably she thinks it might be a dream. Probably my favorite part is when the mailman comes by and the family's poodle has become one of the C.H.U.D and bites him and drags him away by the leg, and the daughter has been at the window the whole time watching, and the family are like, has the mailman been by? And she just, after seeing him get dragged away by the leg by this zombie poodle, is like, the mailman's gone. The visuals in this aren't especially noteworthy. All the camera work, sets, and costumes were very kind of by the numbers and not especially noticeable to me. They were just checking all the boxes. If we need this shot, and this shot, this kind of set, this kind of costume. I guess maybe this movie did need to be grounded in that way. If they had been really weird with the kind of camera shots and costumes in this, it may have jumped the shark even more, because it's completely overblown already. But there just wasn't anything interesting to pick apart there either. It does its job, but nothing really noticeable. On the other hand, I really like the aesthetic of the Halloween segments toward the end. You've got these trick-or-treaters walking around, and then a Halloween dance, which was really fun to watch, because you've got this band who I guess are either actually Wall of Voodoo or a stand-in for Wall of Voodoo, playing this really fun music, and all of these kids in their costumes dancing, and it was kind of fun to try to pick out who was dressed as what. Effects-wise, the drained of blood face and sharp teeth that we get for all of the C.H.U.D in this was a decent makeup look, although I wish we could have gotten some actual C.H.U.D in this. That could have been fun. There's a brief lightning strike at the very beginning of the film over the town, which looks really cheesy and fake. Especially because it didn't look like it was night yet. It looked like it was the middle of the day when we're seeing this very bright lightning flash across the sky, so I don't know. The very few bits of gore that we get in this film look decent. There's not really much to see there, but they look alright, and they use them for some kind of fun gags. Another thing I probably should have mentioned in the story here is that the C.H.U.D are defeated in this by being frozen, which is what they do to Bud at the beginning of the film, and then he thaws out. But then they later start using their body heat to, like, thaw themselves out, which is a really weird thing. So they have to, like, hook electricity up to the frozen C.H.U.D and blow them up. It's a really, really weird, convoluted way of killing them. But the actual effects of them freezing and then melting out again looks really, really good. All in all, it's not a C.H.U.D movie, but even as its own unique thing, it doesn't do a lot for me. It's very watchable, but most of the jokes don't land for me. I wouldn't call it a terrible movie that you should avoid, but I also wouldn't say this is a must-watch, and I wouldn't say you should go out of your way to seek this one out. And even if you do just want, like, a turn-off-your-brain fun movie, I think a lot of the other movies I've reviewed, both in this series of Vestron box set reviews and just everything I've done, are gonna be more worth your time than this. But it's a competently made movie, and it's kind of cute, so if you really, really do want to check this thing out, I'm not gonna say you're not gonna get what you ask for. That is my review of C.H.U.D 2, Bud the C.H.U.D. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!